Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. Federal Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre is once again calling for a public inquiry into foreign interference. Israel has shrugged off a top UN court's order demanding the Israel Defense Forces to cease military operations in Gaza. And we hear from the Alberta RCMP about how rural crime has been decreasing here in our province.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. Federal Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre is once again calling for a public inquiry to look into foreign interference. Now, speaking to reporters in Toronto, Poilievre says a big focus on that interference should be China.
We know that Beijing interfered not once but twice to help Justin Trudeau get elected, and who could blame them? After all, Trudeau says he admires the basic Chinese communist dictatorship. He admires Fidel Castro. He adheres to their ideology, and so they want him in power, and they've helped twice get him elected. He does whatever they want, and they help him stay in power in exchange. They gave $140,000 to the Trudeau Foundation. You know, the Trudeau Foundation, David Johnson's old organization? Well, Trudeau hires him to investigate the interference in the Trudeau Foundation. But David Johnson says, don't worry about that. I had someone look into it and make sure that I'm not in a conflict of interest. And what do you know? That someone is a judge who is also a member of the Trudeau Foundation.
Ontario Conservative MP Leslyn Lewis says many Canadian homeowners are quite concerned that they may become homeless due to the spending habits of the Trudeau government. Lewis says all of the spending from the federal government has led to higher inflation, including mortgage rates. She says many Canadians can't afford the financial hit when it comes to renewing their mortgages.
Some payments will even triple, according to a new report. When will this government rein in their inflationary spending so more Canadians don't have to worry about homelessness?
It's certainly well known that grocery price inflation is a problem that all countries are facing around the world. Grocery price inflation in Canada, there's some good news that just came in with a report that shows that food price inflation is in fact coming down in Canada. It's at 1.4% in April, down from 1.9% from the month before. That is certainly encouraging news for Canadians, but it's cold comfort for sure. We're actually addressing the root causes of the issue by increasing competition in the marketplace and investing in a national school food program. Thank you.
The top United Nations court has ordered Israel to halt its military campaign in Rafah in the Gaza Strip. Israeli government officials say they have the right to defend themselves against the Hamas terrorists and is unlikely to comply with the court ruling.
The court considers that, in conformity with its obligations under the Genocide Convention, Israel must immediately halt its military offensive and any other action in the Rafah governorate which may inflict on the Palestinian group in Gaza conditions of life that could bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part.
Israeli government officials say the bodies of 3 more hostages killed on October the 7th by the terrorist group Hamas were recovered overnight in Gaza. Many families are losing hope that their loved ones who were taken hostage are still alive.
It is with a heavy heart that I share that last night, Israeli special forces in Gaza rescued the bodies of our hostages, Hanania Vlonka, Michelle Nissenbaum, Orion Hernandez. Their bodies were rescued during a special operation based on precise intelligence in the area of Gaza.
TBN Israel journalists Yair Pinto and Madi Shoshani discussed how humanitarian aid is making its way to the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. They talked about how the entryways are now delivering food and other aid to displaced Gazans.
The trucks go to the United Nations and other aid organizations that are in charge of distributing these trucks and this aid to the Gazan civilian population in the Gaza Strip. So that's how it goes. So no American soldier is on the Gaza shores. They are in charge only of logistics, and then Israel is in charge of the security of these trucks in Gaza. And then the United Nations is in charge of distributing all these trucks and the aid to the Palestinian people.
Yeah.
Okay, I see that the weak point in all of this structure is after it leaves the IDF sand. Basically, from the moment that the UN organizations and other humanitarian organizations take the trucks, I see that as the weak point, because from that point, Israel is not involved in making sure that the food actually goes to the civilians and not taken over by gangs, by Hamas terrorists, or other, non-friendly organizations in the Gaza Strip.
Organizers of a pro-Palestinian encampment at the University of Toronto say they're deciding their next steps after the school gave them 24 hours to clear out. The encampment was set up on May the 2nd, calling on the university to cut ties with Israel over its ongoing war in Gaza. U of T officials said the encampment at the downtown Toronto campus must end now, and a trespass notice will be issued if an agreement is not reached. Students at the encampment say they are appalled by the university's approach, calling the offer, quote, inadequate. Jeanette Rocher is now with a quick peek at the weekend forecast here in southwestern Alberta. Jeanette, it looks like there's been a break in the clouds and a fairly sunny weekend is shaping up.
Fairly sunny indeed, Hal, but if you're wearing a hat, you're going to want to hang on to that because we are seeing some very gusty winds on Saturday. We're seeing a southwest wind at 20, gusting up to 40, and then increasing to 60 kilometers per hour by Saturday afternoon. But a lovely daytime high of 18 degrees and, of course, plenty of sunshine. Now, this evening, we are seeing a slight chance of showers. Could see an overnight thunderstorm as well as a risk of frost with that overnight low of 4 degrees. So that means you should probably cover up those plants and flowers on your deck if you have them out there already. I'll be back later in the show to give you that 7-day forecast. Hal?
Great. Thanks so much, Jeanette. A walk was held in Galt Gardens earlier today with the aim of raising awareness about schizophrenia. The activity, which was organized by the Schizophrenia Society of Canada, also seeks to reduce stigma and support those affected by the mental illness. Wendy Bonertz, the Alberta Program Director at SSC, gives us more details about their walk.
Every year on May 24th, which is World Schizophrenia Day, we meet in 6 places around the province for our Strides of Hope walk. And it's just an awareness walk to help people understand that there's 1 in 100 people are living with schizophrenia. And there's a lot of stigma around this illness. And we just hold this walk just trying to draw more awareness and make, just make people aware of the difficulties that people have and the fact that there is hope. Stigma affects people in a lot of ways. It affects their ability to find housing, to find employment, even just in personal relationships. So it really affects every part of their life. And people living with schizophrenia are actually, percentage-wise, less violent than the general population. So it's just a lot of misinformation out there about schizophrenia. We have our Schizophrenia Society office and branch here in Lethbridge, where they offer peer support programs and education programs for both family members and people living with schizophrenia.
I'm very proud to be part of the facilitator and member of the SSA here in Lethbridge. And I think it does a lot of good things for helping us form community so that we can all feel like we have a place to be.
According to the Schizophrenia Society of Canada, as of September 19th of 2023, more than 300,000 Canadians suffer from schizophrenia. Since 1958, Lethbridge College has graduated tens of thousands of students, and today, over 1,000 have been added to that list, many graduating with distinction and honors. As BCN's Jeanette Rocher reports now, one student even received the prestigious Governor General's Medal.
It was a sea of black gowns and tasseled caps at Lethbridge College today as more than 500 graduates walked across the stage to receive their diplomas, degrees, and certificates from at least 30 different areas of study in 2 separate convocation ceremonies.
Overall, we have 1,200 grads, but not all of them attend convocation. So today we're going to have crossing the stage about 550 in total. So we broke it up about 300 one ceremony, 250 the other.
Many of the grads making the dean's list and crossing the stage with distinction, great distinction, and honors, including this year's valedictorian, Annette Campert.
It is a great honor to be here today as a valedictorian.
And Kay Marquez, who received the coveted Governor General's Academic Medal.
When I heard about the news, I felt emotional and I cried. Yeah, I feel like all the hardships that I had while studying are worthwhile.
Marquez not only received a straight 4.0 GPA in her engineering design technology diploma, but she's also a wife, mother of 3, and worked full and part-time jobs throughout her course. How did you do this?
Honestly, I don't know, but every Sunday I attend a mass. So, I start the week with a prayer, and I would pray that, Lord, this will be a busy week, and guide me, help me manage all the schedules.
Marquez, who came to Lethbridge just 18 months ago from the Philippines, joins the many international students from 21 different countries this year. In addition to the 2 spring convocation ceremonies, the college is also holding an Indigenous Honor Night Friday evening to recognize the college's Indigenous graduates. Registrar Marco Hildersum says, as a former instructor, nothing is more rewarding than seeing students cross the stage.
It's fantastic, and this was a day that was kind of a culmination of all your work. Seeing the students introducing they want to introduce you to their family, so it shows kind of we're part of their life, and they want to share that, so that's fantastic.
For Bridge City News, I'm Jeanette Roche.
Like the city of Lethbridge, homeowners in the town of Coaldale will be seeing a property tax increase. Town Council approved the 2024 property tax bylaw, which will see a 4.13% increase in both residential and non-residential property taxes. In a release, town officials said the rate is done on the basis of a 5.2% decrease in the residential mill rate and a 2.5% decrease in the non-residential mill rate. The mill rates were approved to help offset increased costs associated with inflationary growth in both residential and non-residential property values. It appears as though not many people want to participate in the federal government's gun buyback program. Canada Post said they can't make it work, and the RCMP have allegedly had issues with it. Well, when it comes to legal firearms owned by farmers and ranchers wanting to protect themselves, Mike McCauley with the RCMP Community Safety and Wellbeing Branch says gun owners need to be very careful in rural communities.
We understand Albertans have a right to firearms, and we don't want to get in the way of that, but we do ask Albertans to lock those up. Unfortunately, there's a lot of crime guns that are stolen from good, hardworking rural Albertans that have guns for proper purposes, but they get stolen because they don't necessarily lock them up properly.
Catch the full interview with Mike McCauley from the Alberta RCMP and BCN's Jeanette Roche coming up later in our program. Alberta RCMP released new stats about their National Impaired Enforcement Day, which took place over the Victoria Day long weekend. Police say they removed a total of 173 impaired drivers from the roads. That includes 42 which were nailed during the National Impaired Driving Enforcement Day across 36 check stops. Police did not reveal if this was an increase or decrease from last year. They did say, however, that impaired drivers who were caught were hit with a 90-day suspension, a 30-day vehicle seizure, a 1-year mandatory ignition lock, a $1,000 fine, and a criminal record. A woman has filed a lawsuit in New York accusing rapper Sean Diddy Combs of sexual assault, batter, and gender-motivated violence. The lawsuit comes after a series of allegations against the musical artist. The woman says Combs subjected her to violence and abuse over several years back in the 1990s. She alleges in one incident, Combs forced her to take ecstasy and be intimate with his late former girlfriend, Kim Porter. U.S. President Joe Biden's son Hunter Biden is set to go to trial on June 3rd for federal firearms-related offenses. He's also being accused of lying about his drug use on a federal form when he purchased a gun back in October of 2018.
He had the gun for about 11 days. Hunter Biden has pleaded not guilty, and his lawyers have pushed unsuccessfully to dismiss the charges. In his memoir, Beautiful Things, Hunter Biden describes in detail struggling with a drug addiction around this time period, but his lawyers say he didn't break the law. The trial, which is going to happen in Delaware's federal court, is expected to last about 3 to 6 days. Prosecutors have said they plan to show jurors portions of his memoir as they try to prove that he lied when he marked on the form that he wasn't a drug user.
So what does it take to have a very successful marriage? Many people say communicating or maybe even going on date nights. Dr. Gary Lovejoy is a marriage counselor and author of the book, Marriages in the Bible, What Do They Tell Us? He says one of the keys to a healthy and happy marriage is transparency.
Something may bother you, something may be upsetting you that your spouse is doing, but you say nothing. You just keep it under wraps. Well, your partner can't change anything if you don't tell them what's going on. And on the by the same token, you're deceiving inside, and that just goes down underground and works like a cancer against the relationship. So transparency and honesty in a relationship is absolutely imperative.
Dr. Lovejoy will also discuss how you can divorce-proof your marriage. He'll share details coming up later in our broadcast. Edmonton Oilers superstar Connor McDavid scored in double overtime as the Oilers took Game 1 of the NHL's Western Conference Final by beating the Dallas Stars 3-2. McDavid says good teams like his find a way to win close games, especially in the playoffs.
You got to win tight games. You know, we're down to the final 4 teams, and you don't get to the final 4 without being a great team. You know, so all 4 teams are solid. You know, Dallas is a great team, and it's going to be tight hockey. And we're comfortable in these games. We're comfortable in this environment, and I thought we did a great job. Truthfully, all game. I thought we played really well all game and generated chances, defended well. Thought we did a lot of good things.
I am so thankful for all the moisture we've been receiving here across much of southwestern Alberta, but also thankful that a very nice weekend appears to be shaping up. A full look at the weather picture is on deck. It appears as though the rain clouds are slowly leaving us here in much of southwestern Alberta. Jeanette Rocher is now with all of the weather details. Jeanette, it appears as though, you know, we may have some rain again tonight, but a decent weekend is shaping up, and it'll be really nice if you want to go for a walk through the coulees or around Henderson Lake.
Yeah, it should be a nice sunny, albeit a windy one on a Saturday. Hell, we are looking at winds from the southwest on Saturday, gusting to 20 up to 40 kilometers per hour, and then increasing to 60 by Saturday afternoon. But a lovely 18 degrees, clear sky. Still got to get through some thunder showers this evening, as well as that overnight low of 4 degrees, which could give us a frost warning in effect. So on Sunday, jumping ahead there, for the rest of the week, literally, we could be seeing a lot more clear skies. 16 for a high on Sunday, and then clear skies after that. 19 is the expected high on Monday. Tuesday sitting at 26. Same thing for Wednesday, and then down to 22 on a Thursday. So it is going to feel a lot more like summer as we get into next week. That average high there, 19 degrees for this time of year. Average low, 5. 33 was our record high on this day back in 2001, and in 2000 we were sitting at -5, which was the record low. 5:35, that's when the sun rose this morning. Sunset this evening at 9:22, 2 minutes longer than we saw yesterday for daylight. So daylight hours looking like 15 hours and 47 minutes today. Very wet and rainy on the west coast tomorrow. Victoria, 14 degrees, 60% chance of showers, 50 winds, and that Juan de Fuca Strait. It's always so windy in there. 15 for a high in Vancouver, 60% chance of showers in the morning, but cloudy skies in the afternoon. Edmonton looking at 30% chance of showers, 16 for a high. 14 expected to be the high in Calgary tomorrow, seeing a risk of a thunderstorm, also 60% chance of showers. For the rest of the prairies, mostly dry across Saskatchewan. 15 in Saskatoon tomorrow with partly cloudy skies, clear skies in Regina, high of 17 degrees. Winnipeg seeing a rainfall warning in effect this evening right through Saturday afternoon. After Saturday afternoon, things should clear up a bit, but still cloudy skies, high of 8 only tomorrow. As we get into central Canada, Toronto, we're seeing 25 for a high, risk of a thunderstorm there. Could see some showers, 21 in Ottawa and 22 in Montreal with a 30% chance of showers there. As we get into the Maritimes, Atlantic Canada, Fredericton, 23, clear skies, beautiful day in Halifax as well, high of 22 degrees. Charlottetown, 20, much cooler along the water there, chance of showers, and 60% chance of drizzle or showers in St. John, 16 for a high, but 10 by the coast. There you have it, that is your forecast.
Retail sales fell 0.2% to $66.4 billion in March. Stats Canada says it was weighed down by lower sales at furniture, electronics, and appliance retailers. Retail sales, however, at motor vehicle and parts dealers gained a full percentage point for the month. The agency says that April retail sales increased by 0.7%. Ontario is speeding up its expansion of alcohol sales in the province. Premier Doug Ford announced that licensed grocery stores currently selling beer, wine, and cider will be able to sell ready-to-drink cocktails as well, beginning August the 1st. Eligible convenience stores will be able to sell all of these products after September the 5th. Officials say the province will also pay the beer store up to $225 million in public money to support the transition, including to help keep its stores open. An associate business professor says Canada Post needs to revamp its operations after the Crown Corporation lost $748 million before taxes last year. Carleton University's Ian Lee says a good first step would be to switch to mail delivery every other day. Critics say that could lead to massive layoffs, with the move receiving backlash from unions. Lee also recommended franchising the outpost offices currently located at retail chains. The professor says stores such as Loblaws and Shoppers could be on board with the post office as a franchise, says it would help build traffic into their stores. An increase in the farm-level price of chicken in British Columbia could raise costs by as much as 10%. Restaurants Canada made the remark after the BC Chicken Marketing Board's proposal for a new pricing formula to determine the price of the meat in the province was approved. It adds that further price increases to chicken are unsustainable for its members and that British Columbians are already paying higher retail prices for chicken compared to other provinces. Now, here's a look at today's markets.
The TSX was up 120 points on the day to finish at 22,320. The Dow was up 4 points to 39,069. The S&P 500 was up 36 to 5304. And the Nasdaq was up 184 points to finish at 16,920. West Texas Intermediate Oil was up 94 cents to 77.81 US per barrel. Natural gas was down 14 cents to 2.52 US. Gold was up $4.56 to 2,333.82 cents US an ounce, and silver was up 13 cents to $30.26 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at $9.63 per bushel. Barley is at $6.47, canola is at $14.15, and corn is at $7.98 per bushel. Live cattle June contract were down $1.30 to $181.60. Feeder cattle August contract were down $1.23 to $260.23. Lean hogs June contract were down 25 cents to 94.28, and the Canadian dollar was up slightly over the past 24 hours to 73.18 US.
Recapping one of our top stories, the top United Nations court has ordered Israel to halt its military operations in Rafah in the Gaza Strip. Israeli government officials say they have the right to defend themselves against the Hamas terrorists and is unlikely to comply with the court ruling. It appears as though rural crime may be decreasing here in Alberta. BCN's Jeanette Rocher is going to speak with Mike McCauley with the RCMP Community Safety and Wellbeing Branch. We'll have more details for us momentarily. When you see news happening in your community, be sure to drop us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. Also, be sure to visit our website anytime to check out a number of stories and interviews.
Albertans should be able to feel safe in their homes and communities, whether they live in a big city or a rural area. But over the last number of years, we've been hearing a lot of complaints about increasing rural crime. However, today's guest has some encouraging news in this area. Joining us is RCMP Superintendent Mike McCauley from the Community Safety and Wellbeing Branch. Welcome to Bridge City News, Mike. Great to have you on today.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here.
Wonderful. Okay, so tell us about the good news here. Apparently, rural crime in most of southern Alberta has actually decreased since 2023.
Yeah, it's. I looked at the numbers again. It's funny because in my branch, I'm in charge of crime reduction, and we focus more on offenders. We focus more on the root causes of crime versus the numbers. Of course, the numbers are important. They do tell a story, but there's so little we can control about that. But it is extremely positive to hear that many of the main drivers of crime in rural Alberta and especially in southern Alberta have decreased. Break-and-enters are down 18% over the same period of last year. Theft of motor vehicles are down around 22%, and theft of over 5,000 down around 17%. So those are very encouraging numbers.
That is really encouraging. I know, like, I was looking at some stats as well from what you guys, RCMP, are saying. So from January to March, it looks like compared to the same period last year, there have been even like fewer person crime offenses, person against person, I guess that is, 76 less, 213 fewer property crimes, and 373 less total criminal code offenses. And like you said, break-and-enters dropped 18.4% in vehicles. So what do you think is leading to this wonderful news that it's kind of, we're seeing this significant decrease?
Yeah, so there's a few things I'll speak to. It's to be completely blunt, there's not a lot we can do to control the numbers. There's work we can do to, again, we tackle the root causes of crime, we tackle the root causes of victimization, and I think, and I'll share some of that. And all we can do is do the best we can in those areas and to provide the most programming to help Albertans and to try and counteract this. But I can tell you that in the last 5 years, there's actually been around 33% drop in those key property crime areas in southern Alberta, which is massive. And in 2020, they created the position I'm in now. I wasn't the original member in that position, but they created the crime reduction strategy portion of policing in Alberta, and they really put a focus on rural crime and a focus on tackling those root causes. And we saw a major decrease that first year and a half, and then it leveled off a little bit. And in 2 years ago, we created the Community Safety Wellbeing Branch, which is an even more enhanced, robust strategy when it comes to tackling these issues. And we're starting to see the benefits of that. I will give a lot of credit to the frontline members because the hardworking frontline members, if they're not there to do the policing, none of this matters. None of the programming we can create from a headquarters perspective and a strategy perspective works without those hardworking, dedicated frontline members and our community partners that embrace it.
Yeah, exactly. Now, is this the first significant decrease that we've seen in Southern Alberta rural crime in several years, or has it been sort of declining for some time now, or do you really attribute it to sort of what you guys are doing, just the difference that's made?
Well, I'd like to take some credit.
Of course.
In the provincial RCMP realm, again, it's been a big focus for the last 5 years, and we have seen the gains in the last 5 years. But it is very promising. These specific stats that brought us here today, it's very promising, and we're going to hopefully continue that trend. The biggest shift we've had, especially in the last, I'll say, year and a half, is again to develop stronger partnerships. We have partnerships with nonprofit agencies. We have partnerships with community groups. We have partnerships with AHS to tackle drug addiction, to tackle mental health, and to really, again, focus on the root causes. Because what we found is that it's all fine. Yes, police have a role to arrest people that commit crimes, and we're happy to do that, and we do it well. But what we've had to shift from, and it is a shift, I would say it's a relatively global shift, is to not just tackle that, but also to walk upstream. So we use the stream analogy. If you picture us, a beautiful stream, and coming down your screen there, at the bottom is where we pick people up and have to arrest them, or perhaps they're in the depths of drug addiction, and that's why they're committing crimes. And often our social services and police and first responders deal with people at their worst at the bottom of that stream. What we've tried to do is, how about we walk upstream and find out why they're falling in and ending up in that sad state of affairs at the end of that cesspool, and try and work on some of those reasons before we get there. And I think there's been some good success.
That sounds really practical too.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, it's one of those things. It's when you start doing it, it's yeah, of course, I can keep the cycle going and arresting, and the person gets back on the street. And if we don't give them support and services for, again, addiction is a big driver of crime. If we don't try and partner and find the most, as you said, common sense and realistic solutions for these folks to break that cycle, then we're just going to be keeping the same methods going, and it's probably not going to have any success.
Yeah, revolving door for sure. I would imagine that one of the challenges for policing is the huge geographical areas that RCMP have to cover. And, of course, slow response times sometimes can come along with that. So would more officers obviously would be helpful, right? But that normally isn't it's not usually in the budget, right? For government budget to increase the fleet. So have we seen any increases in the number of officers in rural areas or not?
Yeah, so with in recent years, there's a thing, and I won't bore you with the details, but called the police funding model. So in smaller communities have had to change their funding structure to pay and contribute towards policing. And what that's done is it's given us, an increase in resources. There has been over the last 4 years, there has been an increase. It's not as simple as putting a police officer on every corner. That just doesn't work, to be honest. It's about coming up with an overall strategy to increase numbers where they are needed 100% in the front lines, but also to come up with supports and different strategies. So I'll give an example is the crime reduction units that exist. So Southern Alberta and every other RCMP district has a crime reduction unit where their focus is on the highest, the criminals that create the most amount of harm for their communities. And having a team like that, what we've found is you take the top, say 10, or in our case, we deal with the top 100 offenders in the province. And of course, there are some in Southern Alberta. If we focus our energy on those folks, it can actually reduce crime a great deal, because it's not just catching someone who's maybe stealing a loaf of bread. It's going and trying to capture and keep in jail those folks that are causing an enormous amount of harm in communities. Our studies have found, and we use the crime severity index as a measuring stick for our top 100 offenders. And yes, there's the violent offenders that might commit one crime, one heinous crime, and that obviously raises their stats. But we have people that commit over and over again robberies and break and enters and domestic violence, and it's a repeat, as you said, like the revolving doors type of system. We're focusing on those folks, in addition to responding to calls and doing other preventive policing. But by focusing on those folks, if we take them off the street and spend some more time building bail packages and building assistance for the Crown to hopefully get those folks held in jail longer and get longer sentencing, then we're actually preventing a lot more crime than we are if we just kind of take a shotgun approach and try and tackle all of the problems that exist.
Mm-hmm. When it comes to like the crime of theft or property theft, are there any specific items that thieves are targeting? Is it mainly machinery and vehicles, or what are you seeing sort of in those rural areas?
I don't know if there's any specific things. What I will say is that vehicles are a huge problem in Alberta, as theft of vehicles. We do a lot of programming. In the wintertime, we do Project Cold Start, which is focusing on the fact that people leave their vehicles running and go into stores. But outside of that, and especially in rural communities, folks will leave their keys on their dashboard or leave them under their visor and leave the car unlocked. 50% of vehicles are found to be stolen with the keys in the car. That is a massive number. So yes, most of the time criminals are doing crimes of opportunity. So yes, they'll go onto a rural property and they'll see what's out and about. If there's a shed open, that's where they're going to tackle looking for items, and they'll take whatever's available. So it is about target hardening. It is about taking some extra steps. My uncle has a beautiful ranch in Okotoks in Southern Alberta, and we've traveled and visit him often. And I'm always telling him, and I think of him as our other great Albertans down south, is saying, yes, you have a beautiful community here, but people will potentially come and look and see, if your door is locked, or look and see if your vehicles are locked. And if the keys are there, that's what they're going to target. If not, they'll move on to the next property. So there is a lot of steps we can take to try and prevent that.
Definitely. I think rural residents probably don't have that tendency to lock up things as diligently as city dwellers do they?
Yeah, 100%. And I love that about rural Alberta and rural Canada. Canada is a safe place. Let's be very honest about this. It's a safe place. However, there's going to be people that'll disrupt that peace, and small steps like locking your doors at night, closing your garage, locking up your sheds, that does do a massive amount of prevention when it comes to rural crime.
Mm-hmm. And I understand that roughly half of rural crimes happen between 9 p.m. and 6 a.m., right? So can you maybe tell us about something called the 9 p.m. routine?
Yeah, so a 9 p.m. routine, and I'll refer back to my uncle. when we go to visit him with my kids, we go and do chores. The rural crime chore or rural property chores that you have to do, whether it's feeding animals, whether it's just taking care of the property. My suggestion to all rural Albertans and all Albertans, to be honest, is at that time when you're doing your nightly chores, do those extra steps. Like make sure that you leave lights on in strategic areas that you typically do. Make sure you lock up the barn if you have expensive equipment in there. Lock your vehicles up. If you have surveillance cameras, make sure that they're turned on and they're active and working. Close your doors. Do those little things. If you drive by your neighbor's house, in the middle of the night and you see that their garage is open, make a quick phone call and get them to close it, right? All of those little steps truly will make neighborhoods safer and you'll be less likely to be victimized.
Yeah, that kind of comes back to that rural crime watch, almost like the neighborhood watch, right?
Yeah, 100%. And you bring up a great partner of ours. The Rural Crime Watch is a great partner. We have Citizens on Patrol as partners. All of these things, I call them force multipliers. Police can't be on every corner, as we've said. So if you have the more eyes and ears that are out there is absolutely to our benefit. And it prevents crime, but it can provide intelligence. So we truly encourage every Albertan, if you see something even remotely suspicious, call us, please. Maybe it's nothing this time, but maybe it will lead us to understanding more trends and more patterns, and allow us to better serve the communities and better prevent crime.
Mm-hmm. Now, over the years, of course, there's been a lot of debate and controversy over what rural property owners can and can't do to protect themselves. So what are the rules, especially when it comes to using, say, firearms or some other kind of force to protect your own home?
So I'll be completely frank. I get this question a lot, and I'm not going to get into the specific rules and intricacies. Every situation is different, but I will give advice. I'm good at giving advice. My advice is 100%, and you bring up a good point for firearms. When we talk about the 9 o'clock rule, we talk about target hardening. I'm actually in the middle of starting a program that's going to be coming through in the near future about like an education program on firearms. We understand Albertans have a right to firearms, and we don't want to get in the way of that, but we do ask Albertans to lock those up. Unfortunately, there's a lot of crime guns that are stolen from good, hardworking rural Albertans that have guns for proper purposes, but they get stolen because they don't necessarily lock them up properly. So that is an item that is important. Now, getting back to your question, because I'm not dodging your question. My advice is this: there's nothing on your property that's worth yourself or your family members getting hurt for. There's just not. So, if you have an option to flee, if you have an option to get out of any situation, whether that's on a rural property, whether that's on a city property, whether that's in a storefront where you are observing crime, leave the crime fighting to the professionals. We're trained. We have proper tools. And that's just that. At the end of the day, I can't get into specifics. There's so much nuance to what could get you in trouble or not get in trouble. But I'll say there's very few chances that you won't have to escape. And the fight or flight, when it comes to a criminal on your property, it should be flight. You should be trying to get out of there with your family and loved ones as safely as possible, and avoid any confrontation with any people that are on your property for legal purposes.
All right. Well, great advice there. Thanks so much for being with us today, Mike. Looks like we're out of time, but appreciate having you on today.
Well, thank you very much.
Marriage is oftentimes very exciting at first, but then life happens, and after a while, the inevitable challenges begin, especially when it comes to marriage. So how do we ensure that we have a nice, healthy, long-standing marriage? We're going to get some helpful advice today from Dr. Gary Lovejoy. He's been a psychologist and a professional counselor for over 30 years, and he's the author of the book, Marriages in the Bible. What do they tell us? He joins us now from beautiful Bend, Oregon. Dr. Lovejoy, welcome to BC. And by the way, what a cool name for a counselor, Dr. Lovejoy. That is awesome.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me on your show.
Now, you say that marriage is a complex union. I've been married myself for 34 years now, and I've got my stories, but can you explain what you mean by that?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because it's a confluence of different variables acting at the same time. People have two sets of expectations, two sets of problem-solving techniques, and what they've learned in their families, and so the way they arrive at solutions. Their different personalities. And so their histories are very different, and they come in with it with sometimes very different expectations, and so that sets the stage for conflicts unless they understand each other and really know. And this is one of the reasons why it's important to have fairly lengthy periods of dating for getting to really know the other person. The so-called whirlwind relationships don't usually last, and for that reason, because many of them have expectations that are not met once they are married, and they don't have the time to explore what they are before.
Now, people often say that love is all you need in marriage. I think there was a song as well that says, love is all you need. But you say, you know what? Love is enough to maybe marry someone, but is it enough to keep the marriage together, especially for a long period of time?
And the answer to that is actually no, because unlike God's love, our love is not indestructible. It can die, and oftentimes because of conflicts for women, for example, the most common complaints are that they feel neglected and alone. In fact, they often get married because one of the reasons they're getting married is because they don't want to be lonely. They want to have companionship. And when they get married, sometimes that doesn't happen, and that's one of their most common complaints. That and over-controlling husbands. Husbands, on the other hand, find that they don't get respect, and that's partly because the woman is upset. She's angry that she's feeling lonely. In fact, some of them are excruciatingly lonely, and so they begin to criticize their husbands as an expression of their anger. And this, of course, then he feels like, well, I never do anything right. And so it goes right to the heart of his sense of adequacy, and that's threatening to him. And so they begin to have increasing friction. And what started out as a loving relationship then begins to die on the vine because it's simply not watered and prepared and sustained during that period of time because they are too upset with each other. And very oftentimes I find that one of the most common issues underlying both is low self-esteem. And when they have low self-esteem, they are more likely to interpret each other's remarks as condescending, upsetting, and they will undercut each other and so forth. They're more likely to respond out of spite than they are to respond in terms of what can we do to make it better. And so they don't frame it in positive terms, they frame it in the negative terms that they feel.
Now, Abraham is considered many times to be the father of faith, but he wasn't exactly the poster boy for the best marriage of all time. So what do you cite as Abraham's greatest weakness within his marriage?
Well, his greatest weakness was really, ironically, the lack of assertiveness. Because he had tremendous faith, and he believed in God. And believed God so firmly that he took off to a foreign country to which he was unfamiliar, didn't know if he could survive in that country, and yet he went willingly. But when it came to domestic affairs, it was an entirely different matter. As you know, not once but twice, he pawned his wife off as his sister. And why did he do that? Because he was in a foreign country. He was afraid apparently his wife was good looking and afraid that people would kill him or somehow deal harshly with him. And so he pretended that she was his sister. And I've often said to couples, I said, you can imagine if you're walking down the street and some dicey character is walking towards you and your husband pushes you in front of you and say, here, take her, don't take me. I hardly know this woman. I don't think your wife would be too impressed. And we don't really know how Sarah felt at that moment because it's not described, but later it is, because when she is barren and deeply depressed over that, And so she gives him Hagar, and he has Ishmael with him. And Hagar is constantly putting her down, constantly mocking her, and it's happening right in his own, under his own nose, in his own tent, and he said nothing. And finally, you find one of the angriest exchanges in the Bible when Sarah confronts Abraham and says, "Do something. You know, I'm suffering here, and you're not doing a thing. Do something." And of course, he did the classic thing. He said, he basically washed his hands and said, "Well, you take care of it yourself. You're free to do whatever you want with her." Well, she was angry with her, so she dealt harshly with her, and then so much so that Hagar ran away, and then Abraham had to go and fetch her. But all that was because he was unwilling to deal with the situation. He didn't want to deal with it. And so when it came to domestic matters, he was very passive, and his passivity led to, I think, a lot of unhappiness in his relationship. Obviously, Sarah was not happy.
Now, you suggest that transparency is the hallmark of a very healthy marriage. So we're not just asking our politicians to be more transparent, but our spouses as well?
Yes, oh, absolutely. In fact, if you're not transparent, what happens is that something may bother you, something may be upsetting you that your spouse is doing, but you say nothing. You just keep it under wraps. Well, your partner can't change anything if you don't tell them what's going on. And by the same token, you're deceiving inside, and that just goes down underground and works like a cancer against the relationship. So transparency and honesty in a relationship is absolutely imperative, and I really strongly believe that couples should periodically, if not once a week, just sit down and just talk about their relationship. Say, how are we doing? Is there anything that you see we need to work on together, and so forth, so that there's always an honest. We all know each other. We know where each other stands, what's happening. We know how to make changes, but you can't make change you don't know about. And so consequently, if you kept in the dark, the relationship simply goes in a downward trajectory.
Yeah, communication is key. It's the same with my wife and I. If there's anything bothering us, let's talk it through. Let's talk about it. You know, if anything whatsoever is bothering, communication.
Absolutely.
Now, you're right that couples need to periodically assess the state of their marriage. So how do we go about doing that?
Well, to assess the state of your marriage is to really just sit down and talk to each other and say, are there any things that are going on that are bothering you that you haven't shared with me? Something that maybe we can work on together. That actual invitation to do that, by the husband particularly, the actual invitation to do that is an invitation for intimacy. Because what it does is says, I want to know you well. I want you to know you even better. I want to know all the things that are going on with you. And if there's anything I can do that makes your life better, I want to do that. That's an expression of love and an invitation to intimacy. And when you do that, it automatically has a positive impact on your spouse. Because you can't help but think, gosh, you know, they took the risk of being honest with me about something that was maybe bothering them, and that's intimacy. But most people think of intimacy as being very close and kissing and touching and so on. And that's true, that's intimacy. But most people don't think about actually talking about difficult issues as part of intimacy, and it's because it's being honest about the whole person, not just putting on a show for the sake of tranquility, but rather being honest so that something can be done about it.
So, Dr. Lovejoy, is it really dangerous putting together a list on a piece of paper, writing down maybe things you want your spouse to work on to really help to contribute to a healthier marriage? Like she'll be writing down snoring for him, he's writing down bad cooking for her. I mean, that's probably not that productive or not that beneficial.
No, actually, when you're asking for a change, what you're doing when you're being honest like that, you're not asking how can you change, you say how can I change. In other words, I'm asking what am I doing that might be bothersome to you, might anger you, might feel I'm putting you down. I may be doing things that I'm not even aware of that are detrimental to the relationship. And so you're letting me know some things that are that are bothering you. But I'm really asking about me, not about you. And that tends to trigger, though, mutual honesty, so that my spouse will, in turn, ask, "Is there anything I'm doing that I can change?" So we're asking how each other can change, not from the other person, but to ourselves. And that's what involves humility. And I think humility and self-esteem are intricately related. One cannot occur without the other. You cannot have humility if you have low self-esteem, and you cannot have high self-esteem if you don't have humility. So the two are interrelated in such a way that you see this in this mutuality of connection about how to make change in our relationship.
Sometimes marriages fall into a simple routine. So how can we really avoid that and make things spicy and fresh and new once again?
Absolutely. In fact, one of the things I sometimes have clients do is I'll say to them, in a given situation, "What do you usually do?" And they'll describe to me what they usually do in the situation. And what I tell them is, "So then do something different." And they'll say, "What?" I said, "It doesn't matter. Just something different." Because if you do something different, then you're going to elicit a different response. And if you want to see change in a relationship, you make the change first and watch the change take place in your spouse, because your spouse has to adapt to the change. I don't know if you have the time, but I have a perfect example of that, of a couple that came in to see me. I don't know if I have the time to share this or not. Woman came in, her relationship was falling apart. They were screaming at each other, yelling every single night for 5 years. I don't even know how they managed to last that long. And I said, "Well, does he know what you're going to say when you respond to him?" Because he always come home and he was in usually a dark mood. And so he would take her on and start criticizing her or yelling at her. And she would then respond. She said, "I'm no wallflower. I will come back and fight myself." And so they'd have these knockdown, drag out battles. And I said, "Well, I said, do something different." And I said, "Well, what do I do different?" I said, "Well, when you go home, pick up a water pistol and fill it with water and put it in your purse. And the next time he comes home and he starts in on you, instead of yelling back at him, reach in, pull out your squirt gun and squirt him. And right between the eyes, and then run out of the room giggling." And I said, "Do you think that would be different?" And she said, "Oh, it would really be different." So she said, I'll try that." And so she left, and 2 weeks later, she came back, and she was radiant. And I said, "What happened?" And she says, "Well," she said, I did what you said, and the first time he did, I shot him between the eyes, and I ran out." He said, "The only thing I did is I had to look over my shoulder to see how he was responding, and he was standing there dumbfounded, water dripping out his nose, saying, 'What was that all about?' But it ended the argument," she said, "and that was successful." So she did it a second time. So the next night it happened again, so she did it again. Third night she did it, she pulled out her pistol and aimed it at him, and then she was looking down the barrel of his water pistol. He'd got, and they had an old-fashioned water gun fight, which they ran through the house and ended up being soaked in the skin and fell on the floor laughing for the first time. And they suddenly looked at each other. This is the first time we've laughed with each other in over 5 years.
Good thing he used a water pistol and not raw eggs.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
divorce is a very tough thing all around, especially when it comes to kids when you got younger children. Is there a way we can actually divorce-proof our marriage?
Yeah, some of the things we're talking about demonstrating not only transparency and honesty to each other, but be a willingness to forgive one another and to have empathy for what the other person, is feeling. Because oftentimes we only look at it from our perspective, and so it's important that that we see it from their perspective and feed that back to them, so that they know that I understand, or you understand what your spouse is saying. And that in itself is reinforcing. And then with the mercy and the forgiveness that is a part of that, and framing your request for change in positive terms, not negative. Like, "I don't like you doing this, do this instead." Instead of that, saying, "When you do this, it really makes a difference for me." Notice the difference between the two. I'm framing it in positive, proactive terms, as opposed to antagonistic negative terms, which then the other person gets defensive, doesn't really hear what you have to say, and pretty soon it evolves into a fight. And so you make those kinds of interactions which are much more fruitful and much less antagonistic. And each time you do those kinds of things, what you're really doing is you're basically saying, you are valuable to me. You have great worth to me. I love you deeply. And therefore, I want to see our relationship at its best. And that attitude is what comes across. If an attitude comes across as, you bug me, you're always doing something wrong, you never make me happy, you're always on me. If that's the message that comes across, you're going to get resistance. Because the other person is going to then be defensive, and they're going to fight back. And then you say, well, here, I brought it up, and then you just yell at me. What good does that do? And so they feel self-righteous. They feel like, well, I tried and it didn't work, so forget it. And instead, if you're approaching it from the perspective we're talking about, and really asking, how might I change to make life better for you?
Dr. Gary Lovejoy is a counselor and author of Marriages in the Bible. What do they tell us? Thanks so much for joining us today from Bend, Oregon.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me on.
On behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless, and thanks so much for watching.